good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your day for the Salesforce Admins webinar, Drive Salesforce Adoption at Your Company. This is going to be an exciting 30 minutes, I promise you. I am so happy to be rejoined, I will say, with Salesforce MVP and super smart Amber Boaz, who is the CRM platform owner at Rapid7. You absolutely positively should follow her on Twitter. She is at Amber9904. My name is Mike Gerholt. I am the Director of Admin Evangelism at Salesforce. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Gerholt. It's easy enough. Wouldn't be a Salesforce Admins webinar, really just a Salesforce presentation without that forward-looking statement. So just a quick reminder that Salesforce is a publicly traded company and you should make all of your purchasing decisions based on current features and functionality. Now, we're very social as Salesforce admins, and we want you to be social with us. So you can connect with us on Twitter at Salesforce Admins, no I. And you can connect with other Salesforce admins on Twitter by using the hashtag AwesomeAdmin. If you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, be sure to check our pages for Salesforce admins. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out the amazing website admin.salesforce.com, where you can find blog posts, events, admin stories, and even more resources. It's probably where you signed up for this webinar. So in case you missed any of that intro, we are happy to repeat it for you. But I want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. Yay. And the video to the webinar will be posted on our YouTube page, Salesforce Admins, or at bit.ly/user adoption webinar. No doubt you'll probably have questions to the webinar. I did while we were creating it. I probably will still have questions for Amber as well. And to do that, we're going to invite you to jump over to the Trailblazer community, where we have a group, Salesforce Admins Webinars. It's easily joined if you're logged into Salesforce. You can go to bit.ly/admin webinar group. Or if you're in the Trailblazer community, just search on Salesforce Admins Webinars. Now, the great thing is you don't have to wait to the end of the webinar to ask your question. You can post your question in there. We will go through them and try and answer them during the webinar, mostly after the webinar. And of course, we will grab some of those questions for the live Q&A with Amber at the very end. Now, the plus bonus awesome part of all of this is, see the little astro on the left-hand side of the screen? When you see that on a slide, we will be actually posting a poll in that Trailblazer community about that slide. So you can instantaneously give us feedback and interact. It's a webinar. We got 30 minutes. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amber with today's agenda. Amber.
Thanks so much, Mike. I'm super excited to be here. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about adoption, and we're going to talk about why users sometimes don't adopt and how we can get them to do the thing we want them to do, which in general is use Salesforce, but also more specifically, maybe a specific feature. So we're going to talk about how to show them the why, what's in it for me, and how to show them the how, meaning how to train and incentivize your users. And then we're going to talk a little bit about extra resources and tackle some questions. So let's get going. So first, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. So once upon a time, I worked with an organization that had rolled out Salesforce, and they had rolled out mobile. They had rolled out what at the time was called Salesforce One, and it wasn't going well. Lots of folks weren't using it. We had a couple of folks who were really into it, kind of our road warriors, but by and large, people just weren't interested. We had some executive sponsorship. The executives, specifically the sales leadership, was very excited about folks using mobile, but there really wasn't company-wide adoption. And so part of my role was to make that better and to drive mobile adoption. So let's talk a little bit about how I did that and some of the broader themes around adoption. So let's talk about why folks aren't doing what you want them to do. While I was preparing these slides and thinking about over the holiday how to encapsulate this, I ran across this tweet. If you want someone to do something, first ask yourself why they aren't already doing it. And the big piece here that I want y'all to take away is the why they aren't already doing it. Why aren't they using the mobile app? Why aren't they logging in? Why aren't they logging calls? What is it why should they? And so as you think about how to increase adoption in your organization, put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself why. So here's some possible whys. The first one is that they are a horrible person and they want you to fail. You'll notice that is crossed out because that is highly unlikely, but we're going to talk a little bit about that because as an administrator, at least for me anyway, it's really easy to take it personally. I am very invested in Salesforce. If you've seen me in the community at all, you have an inkling of that. And when someone doesn't see the value in it, I sometimes take that personally. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. A couple of other possible whys are they don't see the value. They don't understand what it can do for them, or they see it as too hard for the payoff they are getting, or they simply don't know how. And that's when we're going to talk about some of the training and incentivizing. You'll notice there's a little astro down there, by the way. All right. That was our first little astro. Go take the poll. Okay. So let's start this off a little bit of a pep talk. So again, I tend to take things personally. I'm a little bit of an emotional creature, surprising no one who knows me. One of the things I want you all to take away from this is that you as the administrator or as the wannabe administrator are the steward of your organization's data, which is its most valuable asset, right? Who are your customers and what kind of money they've spent with you, and who are the people within that organization and how they're, are they a promoter of your organization? Are they a detractor? How do they relate to your organization? That's super valuable to your company. And so you being the steward of that is super important. One of the other things I want to remind you is that you and your coworkers are on the same team. Even your most curmudgeonly, paper-based, Rolodex using, laptop is a paperweight on their desk people, and we all have those users, you and that person are still on the same team. You work for the same company and you're working hopefully towards the same goals, which is growth of your organization. So it helps to keep that in mind and not take it personally when they are grumpy. Another thing is you are good at what you do and you're not alone. So let's tackle those in two pieces. You're good at what you do. How in the heck would I know that given there are hundreds of you on this webinar? How could I possibly know whether or not you're good at what you do? I happen to know because you're here in the webinar, right? You have taken the time out of your day to come to this webinar and to learn and to improve yourself and to tackle this problem that I would argue every single organization that uses Salesforce has. Well, any software. This is not unique to Salesforce. This is true across the board. And so the fact that you are here and learning means you're good at what you do. You're also not alone, right? As Mike listed off a half dozen places where you can get involved with others in the community who are in the same boat, who are having the same experiences, and who want to commiserate and share with you. So two videos here. The one on the left is Kid President. I don't know if you're familiar. Kid President is an amazing human. And he did a really neat little pep talk video talking about how we're all on the same team and let's do this together. It's heartwarming and it will make you smile. The one on the right, that's my buddy, Amy. Amy, if you're listening, I'm waving at you. Amy did a talk at Dreamforce about imposter syndrome and feeling like you're a fraud and that soon everybody's going to figure it out. I have imposter syndrome. I'm not afraid to admit that. I'm always shocked when Mike says, hey, Amber, you want to do a webinar? Why would anybody want to listen to anything I have to say? But so Amy really talks about how to tackle that and how to better believe in yourself. So again, you're amazing and you are the steward of your organization's most valuable asset. And I want you to feel empowered to make changes in your company. So let's talk about how to do that. All right, you have the power. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the power pose where you put your hands on your hips and you puff your chest out and you stand with your chin high. You have the power to be the change agent in your organization. Change is hard. If you acknowledge that for yourself and you acknowledge that for your users who you want to make a change, that has a really big impact. People need to hear that you hear them. And when they, when you say, hey, I need you to just, be better about logging your calls, and they grump and they groan and they whine, to say, I get it, it's hard, you're right, this changes your process, but here's why that's important. People's ears perk up. That's interesting to them. It's like, oh, she gets it. She gets that this is hard. Okay, I'll pay more attention. With that said, involving these stakeholders from the start. If you want them to log calls, but you've made it so that the screen where they do that has 87 required fields and 14 validation rules, nobody's going to do that. that's not useful. So involving your stakeholders from the start, the people who are going to be doing the task, involve them as early on in the process as possible. Now, if you've inherited a log a call screen with 87 fields and 14 validation rules, make it an initiative to streamline that and involve those stakeholders in that initiative. And thirdly here, rewarding good behavior. So I can't speak to what rewards mean in your organization. To some organizations, it means cupcakes. To some, it means pizza. To some, it means giving somebody an extra day of PTO if they do, go above and beyond in a certain place. But think about what sort of rewards you can give based on the behaviors that you want to drive in your organization. So now that we've talked about like what change is and why it's hard, let's talk about showing them the why, right? You guys have all heard the phrase, what's in it for me, right? Why should I do the thing? Why should I clean my room, Mom? So thinking about the business purpose, why does your organization have Salesforce? What was the goal when it was initially put in place? What is the goal now? Has that goal changed? Because it's highly likely it has, especially if you've had a management change in that intervening time. So what is the goal right now of Salesforce? Is it just to have a place to keep your Rolodex? That's worth knowing, right? What are you trying to get out of Salesforce? Why did your organization even bother? I would suspect that it was a pretty significant investment of time and money to bring Salesforce in and to do the initial implementation. So again, what is the goal? What are you trying to get out of Salesforce? Once you have that information, you can build some metrics around what it takes to achieve that goal and how many records does it mean to have achieved adoption of a given business purpose. So let me give you an example. Let's say I have an outbound calling organization and I want to make sure that everybody makes 50 calls a day. But I have some users who are making those calls, but they're not logging them, right? So to track that they've logged them is important, and make sure that it's visible, who's doing what and who's not. So again, to those adoption metrics. So what are you going to measure? What does adoption mean? Does it mean number of calls logged? Does it mean number of emails tracked? Does it mean users logging in? Maybe they're logging in on the mobile device. Maybe they're logging in on their laptop. You can also measure it on given feature usage, right? So are they using mobile? Are they using the dashboards? What sorts of things are people using? Maybe a metric for you is how many meetings within your organization are being driven by Salesforce dashboards, right? If I want sales leadership to adopt, maybe I show them I build a dashboard for them that shows all their metrics and work with them to run their sales meetings from that dashboard, those kinds of things. Another important piece is to communicate what is being measured so that all of your adoption statistics are transparent and accessible. Will folks game the system? I'm using air quotes that you guys can't see. Will they game the system? Maybe, but that's inherent in any reward system. But as long as you're transparent about what is coming, what they're being measured on, folks can adapt to those behaviors. So you'll notice on the bottom right here, we have a link to the adoption dashboard pack from the App Exchange. This is a free collection of reports and dashboards that you can go get from the App Exchange and put into your org, and then you can customize it to your liking and remove the pieces you don't need and add new pieces if you'd like, adjust them to however you see fit. And that is at bit.ly/Salesforce adoption dashboards. Highly recommend that. All right, so we played with this phrase quite a bit, didn't we, Mike? Be the glue. So being the glue between the business and the technology. Your business users have needs. There are gaps, right? I guarantee that if you got more than 2 coworkers together and you said, I'm going to buy drinks, and you went out for a happy hour, you would get a bunch of information about where the gaps are in the business. You know, people like to whinge over beer. That's just a truism of the business world. As the steward of the technology, you're in an excellent position to be the glue between the business and that technology, to understand what the business process is and see if you can't make it better. And that's where the glue piece comes in. Stick those 2 things together. Be the thing that's holding everybody's hand, making everybody sing Kumbaya. Having a vision, right? So with that information about what people don't like or where the processes are falling down, understand how that could be improved, right? For example, and this is a big one, this happens all the time, records getting stuck in an approval process, right? This expense report is out for approval and it's just sitting there and nobody knows how long it's going to take and there's no visibility into who's being slow about it. There are ways to write reports and or dashboards about those approval processes and understand why, where the bottlenecks are. Start thinking about those things and building out and getting as far as you can in a sandbox. Please don't build in production, pretty please. But build those things in a sandbox and then take that to the leadership and say, hey, I have an idea of how we can improve this process, right? This falls into that 3rd bullet point of taking initiative. I built this cool thing for you. Now, the chances that they're going to adopt it immediately and wholesale are pretty poor, but it's the beginning of a conversation on a piece of the technology that you can then iterate on, right? So maybe you're coming at them with expense reports and they go, oh, actually, every approval needs this kind of dashboard. Great, let's build upon it. So important stuff there. And then the last piece, the last piece on the slide, not the last piece ever, is talking about enforcing clean data practices, right? So if your users are required to enter data into fields, especially text fields, they are going to enter crap if they don't have information. I was actually working with one of my data people today, and one of the fields that we have that's required is competitor lost reason. Why did we lose to this competitor? And 9 times out of 10, the text is don't know. Well, that's not helpful. Why are we making people do that? That's, of course they don't know. Like, what are the chances that they're going to get that information? Why is that field required? And so garbage in, garbage out. All right. So taking the time to invest in listening and learning, right? Listening to your users and asking them questions. Why are approvals getting stuck in the flow? What is the business impact of that? How can we make that more smooth? And understanding the why of those requests. Well, if the approval, happens in one quarter, but the approval doesn't happen until the next quarter, it changes where it falls in the books. Oh boy, that's a big deal. Okay, let's think about how to address that. I'm pretty sure that Mike's got there's some more stuff coming about Sabois, Salesforce administration by walking around, which is walking around amongst your users and understanding, where they're struggling and what pieces of their day are going well. Where are they caught up? Where are they succeeding, right? Celebrating those successes is just as important as fixing the problems. But really, wandering around the building. I was working with an organization that had a very active kind of coffee culture. And so standing around the coffee pot was where all the fun stuff happened. And so I just stood there and kind of handed out the creamer for a couple of hours and had a bunch of conversations with folks, some of it about the weather and the local sports teams, but a lot of it about Salesforce and what they were excited about and what they were worried about. So that was really useful. And then documenting, right? So you've learned all this stuff. Now you know all these things about what your users are doing and what they're concerned about and how you're going to try to fix it. Start documenting those things. So a couple of years back, I did presentation at Dreamforce and then subsequently a webinar about best practices for documenting. And that information is at the following URL. It's at bit.ly/Amber says documentation. And that's a great place to go get some best practices and some information, some ideas about how to start to capture some of these whys and some of these questions. So now that you have all this why, now that you have captured kind of the what's in it for them, right? Let's talk about how to train and incentivize them. So making learning fun, right? Learning can be onerous, right? It can be sitting single file, shoulder to shoulder with all of your friends and watching a wall of text on a PowerPoint while someone drones on into a microphone. That can be training. But training can also be fun. We did actually a training this morning where we had people, we printed out a very big green shot, like very big, like room sized, and had people walk on the printed screenshot to where on the page they thought an action would happen. It was super interactive. It was super fun. It was crazy messy. It was kind of like giant human business twister, but it was great. We had a good time with it. So think about, are you going to do that training in synchronous, meaning in person or virtual like this is, or asynchronous, like if you're listening to the recording, or something like Trailhead or via your company's learning management system or LMS. So providing different options, right? So adult learners learn in different ways. Well, all learners learn in different ways, but adult learners are louder about it. Some folks, need to hear it. Some folks need to be hands-on. They need to be clicking the mouse and doing the thing. But just know that whatever training you come up with does not have to be super formal. In fact, the less formal, I would argue, the better. The more human you are about what you need from people, the more they're likely to respond. If you're very, columns and rows and therefore and hereby, that doesn't resonate with people. And so to be human about it, probably have a human resources or people department. Those folks are often, if not their full-time day job, part of their day job to work with you on these types of things. So leverage those resources. And then it's also useful to use your super users. So some of your users may be pretty engaged. They may be pretty interested and want to learn more. So train them and then have them train their peers. That amplifies your voice and also helps you get closer to your users. And then there on the billboard there on the right, there's some resources on how to build a lesson plan. So Convergence is an organization that has written up some stuff. And so this bit.ly/8-step training plan is a great way to think about how you can start to build a lesson plan. So once you've trained your users, you've onboarded, you've got more stuff going on, start to provide ongoing support, right? Show them how to integrate this technology change into their daily lives. Make the process part of their routine. Make it so that the technology isn't onerous, it's part of the deal. So reinforcing and reviewing the process, right? A process is never done. The only thing that's constant is change. How do you help them understand when a change happens, the why of it, and then enforce that with the ongoing support? So a couple of ideas around ongoing support: a chatter group for questions. If you have a ticketing system or use cases within Salesforce for your administrators and developers, and then the training plan we talked about earlier, especially around onboarding brand new users. So users who are hired after you took this new functionality live, think about how you're going to bring them into the system. All right, let's talk a little about some of the resources. And I'll go through these quick because I talked a lot. So there's a Trailhead badge called UX Personas for Salesforce, UX being user experience. This is a great way to start to think about the types of users you have and how they may be thinking. This is the month of adoption. So there's some adoption resources in the Salesforce admin's website, including those adoption dashboards on the App Exchange. We've got the training plan URL and then the book that I highly recommend of Who Moved My Cheese, which talks about change and how different types of folks handle that.
That's great. Thanks, Amber. That was very thorough. So we'll get in some questions here and we'll leave the wrap-up slide up just to go over. Q&A is in the chatter group, which is Salesforce admin webinar, bit.ly/admin webinar group. We're going to be pulling from that here shortly. There's a survey, bit.ly/AW survey-adoption, all lowercase. And then slides, bit.ly/user adoption webinar, all lowercase. So Amber, first of all, thanks for taking time out to do this. You're so passionate about everything admin, and You know so much. I can spend hours sitting around talking with you. One of your last slides, you talked about like supporting a ticketing system, and as an admin, I've had various methodologies behind that. I'd be curious, what have you done for internal staff requests? How do you handle that?
Yeah, it kind of depends on where. I've done it several ways. So it depends partly on where my job sits within an organization. So right now my job sits in IT, and so we use our IT ticketing system. So if you need help with anything at my company, it all comes through the same ticketing system. I am not a fan of that particular ticketing system, so I won't name its name, but it serves as a way for folks to get IT help. With that said, if you are using it within a team, using Salesforce cases is a fantastic way to A, familiarize yourself with cases if you're not already familiar, and B, users can get help right within Salesforce. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that because it's a fantastic way to tackle that.
Great. So let's talk about, I'm remote, I think you're remote doing this webinar, and the team supporting us is in a different city as well. Do you have any recommendations on handling training virtually?
Screen sharing, camera sharing, having folks see your face is helpful. To the extent that you can literally have people do hands-on exercises or have them share their screen and you walk them through it. That doesn't work for large numbers of users, but that's a good way to keep folks engaged in training. It is hard to remote train a large group of people. I would recommend going there or, bringing your super users to you and then having them train there, wherever there is. It's just engaging with people over a distance is hard.
Gotcha. I can fully understand that. And then last question. So ironically, we've done this for Dreamforce as a team. We've had office hours. I've done it as a Salesforce admin, had office hours, and sometimes my users are just less than enthusiastic to join. What are your thoughts around if there's a lot of locations and there's not an admin in every location?
Yeah, that's a tough one. To the extent that travel is an option, that's worth doing. I like to have virtual coffee with folks where not, separate from our day jobs, just establish a relationship and have a cup of coffee together while online with webcams. That's a great way to get to know folks and to understand who your super users are. I don't have a bunch of answers for that. Establishing relationships over distance, I haven't figured that one out, but video chat is helpful. Audio is helpful. If you've got to go the text only route, the Slack or the Chatter, it can be done, but it's just that much harder. To the extent you can be in the same room, do that.
Great. Well, what looks like we're right at time, and there's still some questions in the community. So Amber, we will jump in there, and if you have an opportunity to jump in, we will get those answered. There. Great. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day and enjoying this absolute great talk about Salesforce adoption.